Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us here. My name is John Bravender. I'm the Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service at Central Pacific Hurricane Center. Thank you for joining us here this morning. This is a new venue that we haven't held this briefing in this room before, and it's a nice feature of our relationship with the university that we're able to take advantage of a facility like this. With that in mind, I'd like to thank Dean Taylor of the School of Ocean and Earth Science and Technology for having us here. I'd also like to thank Brian Chi for making sure all of this works. While we're at it, I'd like to thank our speakers who will be presenting today and all of you for joining us. This looks a lot different than it did this time last year. The 2018 hurricane season came at the end almost as an afterthought to a series of many different natural disasters. But it did seem to have an impact on people, and it very much primed the public for preparing for this hurricane season. As we're heading into this year, I was worried that people would become complacent and after several near misses wouldn't take events as seriously as they should. But when we look back at all the damage that we had last year, days of record rainfall and flooding from an offshore hurricane, wind damage and flash flooding from a weakening tropical storm, even coastal erosion and road closures from a hurricane that was moving away from us. People saw all this damage from events and still realized that we were lucky and it panned out, and it could have been much worse. Eventually, our luck will run out. Will that be this year? I certainly hope not. But as a wise man once said, hope is not a plan. So as we hear what we're expecting from this hurricane season, we will prepare the same, no matter what. And before we get too much into the hurricane portion of this, I'd like to invite Kevin Kodama, our senior service hydrologist, up here to present a summary of the previous wet season and outlook for the coming dry season. Kevin?
Good morning, and thank you everybody for coming over. I'm the hydrologist here at the Weather Forecast Office in Honolulu, and like I was telling Leanne from our regional office, I'm like the appetizer for this. I'm overpriced and not enough to satisfy. But let's just get started. The wet season runs from October through April of every year, and we started the wet season with an El Nino that was developing, in the process of developing. And then as a result, it played a major role in the forecast, and at that time we called for the above average rainfall for the early part of the wet season, but below average rainfall from December 2018 all the way through the spring of this year. And because it was forecast to be a weak El Nino, weak El Ninos tend to be leaky, so we were calling for some heavy rain events to make its way and affect the Hawaiian Islands. And so what actually ended up occurring was that we ended up with a pretty erratic wet season, a lot of swings, wet to dry to wet again. And we started off with October, which was generally wet across the state, and transitioned to November and December, which was just wet in the windward sides, and then more or less dry on the leeward sides. And then once January came around, the El Nino weather pattern took hold, and right on time, just like a Japanese train, we got very dry across the state. And so, that was like, okay, here it is. But February rolls around, and as you recall, just with February 10th, we had that unusual storm system, strong winds, really large surf, and some rain that swept across the state, and additional systems that came on through. So February was wet across the state with the exception of leeward Kauai. And then March came around and we got dry again across the state. And then we ended up the wet season in April with generally wet conditions on the windward sides and dry conditions on the leeward sides. So where are we at in terms of rainfall? We ended up with some drought taking hold because of the January wetness, and then that got eased because of the February rainfall, and then it came back again. So by late March through April, we got drought developing again, and by the end of the wet season, we have a severe drought in 3 counties, in Kauai, Maui County, and the Big Island, leeward sections of those areas. We have severe drought going on right now. So in terms of statistics, because of the wet, dry swings, we ended up right in the middle. If you look at the overall numbers, just ranked 15th out of 30th in terms of the wettest wet season in the last 30 years. And you look at the different index rain gauges across the state, kind of just right in the middle, maybe a shade on the below average side. So, but just because of a lot of swings, we just sort of ended up near average. And so what are we looking at for the dry season? So that's May through September timeframe. Climate Prediction Center is saying that they're expecting the El Nino, which is going on right now, to continue through the summer, and they're calling for above normal rainfall for the east half of the state, so Big Island and Maui County, and then below average rainfall for Oahu and Kauai. When you look at it and factor in terrain, for the Big Island and Maui, the above average rainfall will primarily affect the windward slopes, and the leeward sections will continue to remain dry. And of course, for the leeward, for Oahu and Kauai, we're looking at below average rainfall for across the board for both counties. What that means is that because we already have existing drought going on in the leeward areas, we're anticipating that the drought will continue to worsen, will expand and also worsen. So we have a severe drought in the 3 counties, as I mentioned earlier, and potentially could worsen as we go on through the summer. And in terms of impacts, we're already seeing agriculture impacts, especially for the ranchers right now. And we are expecting a more active brush fire season, mainly because we've got an early start to the dry season for the leeward areas. So, normally, or last year, we had kind of a later start, but this year we're thinking that the brush fire season is going to get a much earlier boost. And that's all I had. There's, on the media advisory and the handouts, there's some links to some weather maps, the rainfall maps, and then you can check out our ArcGIS online web story. There's a link there as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. For reference, we have hard copies of information to hand out after this, including the synopsis, the summaries that we're discussing here, as well as additional preparedness information. So we'll pass those out in hard copy form for anyone who wants it, and send them via email afterwards, including this presentation for those who want the information to follow on. At this time, I'd like to invite Governor Ige up here to say a few words. Governor?
Thanks, John. Thanks for hosting this event. I don't think I have to remind anyone about last hurricane season, and obviously the Big Island eruption overlaid that entire hurricane season, which made it a huge challenge for our emergency responders for several months during the hurricane season last year. Hurricane Lane brought record-setting rainfall, causing more than $7 million of damage on Hawaii Island. We saw heavy rains and flooding on Maui, and wind damage and power outages across the state. And just 2 weeks after that, we braced for Tropical Storm Olivia, which made landfall in both Maui and Lanai, and brought us more heavy rain, flash floods, and wind damage to Maui County and Oahu. And then there were hurricanes Hector, Norman, and Walaka, which brought high surf, coastal flooding, and prompted beach closures to parts of the state. My point is that the state of Hawaii and our counties were prepared then. We always prepare for the worst. And I think most importantly, as we approach the hurricane season, it's very important for us to revisit all of the important preparations that we can do. It's time to take action to safeguard our homes against the potential impact of high winds. Listen to and be prepared for hurricane hazards and warnings. Reminder to revisit your family emergency plans, check the supplies, make sure that your family is prepared to respond to any emergencies. And most importantly, I am encouraging our entire community to stay vigilant and prepared and check your family supplies and preparedness. One of the things I do get to do on behalf of Lieutenant Governor Josh Green and myself is proclaim the week of May 5th to the 11th as Hurricane Preparedness Week. We did have a number of preparedness activities, and certainly we'll be doing our part to continue to remind the public that the best thing that they can do is assure that their family is prepared and that they are taking all of the precautionary measures to ensure that they have the right provisions to be safe. And with that, I'd like to present this proclamation to Christopher Brenchley. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor. Now I'd like to invite Mr. Tom Travis, Administrator of Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, up to say a few words as well.
I have basically 5 quick points. The first is that for me, Hurricane Lane was a wake-up call. It showed clearly that the bad one can hit Oahu. Luckily, it didn't last year, but we must be prepared. The second thing I'd like to emphasize is that we need to be as prepared as possible, and the community is a key element in that preparation. What can members of the community do? They can prepare their emergency kits and be sure they have 14 days of supplies, keep their gas tanks full. It's important that that kit be put together now and maintained throughout hurricane season, avoiding necessity for long lines at stores and at gas when a storm approaches. And finally, I ask everyone to stay informed, pay attention to what the weather is and what the threats are, and I appreciate everybody's attendance today as we get a prediction of what this season will be like. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'd also like to acknowledge an additional important person here who saw fit the usefulness of attending this. Mayor Caldwell, I'd like to welcome you as well. I understand you don't have any prepared remarks, but thank you for being here. We appreciate it. Now I'd like to invite Colby Stanton, the Director of Readiness for FEMA Region 9, up here to say a few words. Do you want the graphic now?
Sure. Okay. Good morning, and thank you very much to the National Weather Service and our senior leaders for joining us here today. We haven't heard yet what the hurricane forecast is for this year, but it really doesn't matter for the message that we have. I don't want to steal National Weather Service's thunder by using their "it only takes one" line, but the truth is it does only take one major storm, and in fact it takes less than a major storm sometimes, as unfortunately we heard the litany of woes that the state experienced last year, including severe flooding that resulted from unnamed rainstorm in April of last year that the residents of Kauai and East Oahu are still struggling with the recovery from. The governor and the administrator of Hawaii Emergency Management Agency have already talked about some of the general preparedness steps that we can take. Another step that's often talked about this time of year is hurricane insurance. And while hurricane insurance is very, very important and protecting ourselves from the windstorms or the wind that can be associated with hurricanes is important, it's not all that Hawaiians or residents of Hawaii need to do. I'd like to underscore that most standard homeowner, business, and renters insurance policies don't cover flood, hurricane, and earthquake insurance or earthquake damage. While hurricane insurance is critically important as we enter into this hurricane season, it does not cover flooding. And so I'm here to talk about the National Flood Insurance Program and what residents of Hawaii can do to protect what they've worked so hard to earn. Flood insurance protects your building and your savings from flood losses, whether due to a hurricane, tropical storm, or just heavy rains, by helping to cover the cost of repairing your home or business and replacing your belongings. Damage from a flood could mean financial damage in your home is enough to cause over $25,000 worth of damage. Under 10% of the residents of Hawaii have purchased flood insurance. Combine that with the fact that 1 out of 4 flood insurance claims is outside the high hazard risk area. This means that many in Hawaii are underprepared for disaster. Anywhere you live in Hawaii has the potential of flooding during storms, and we're all susceptible to its impacts. We like to see it say at FEMA that if it rains where you live, you may need flood insurance. We encourage property owners and renters to consider purchasing flood insurance before hurricane season begins. Don't get caught unprepared. Call your insurance agents and purchase flood insurance to protect your home and business now before the next storm strikes. Policies typically take up to 30 days to go into effect, so we do encourage you to act now as we enter into the storm season. While the recovery process from flooding or any other disaster is daunting, insurance helps. Insured residents are able to recover faster and more fully from a flood than their uninsured neighbors. So as I said, now is the time to invest in flood insurance by calling your insurance agent, by visiting FloodSmart Hawaii, floodsmart.gov/hurricane, or calling 1-800-427-4661. And floodsmart.gov/Hawaii is up on the graphic to my left. We encourage residents to get the peace of mind that comes with properly insuring your family. It's critically important that you take the steps that we've already talked about, having that plan, knowing how you're going to communicate with your family, especially if you're not together when the word starts coming in of a storm. I also have to mention tsunamis, where you may not be together with your family when the word comes in. Those can happen at any time. As they say, it's always tsunami season. Government at every level is responsible to its citizens to prepare for and respond to disasters. And we're all here as a community taking those steps to get ready. But government can't and shouldn't do it alone. We need citizens to know their risks, to know their role, and take action to protect themselves. Taking these steps can give you peace of mind so that you're ready for this hurricane season. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colby. Now I'd like to invite Chris Brenchley up to discuss the 2018 summary and the 2019 outlook.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Aloha. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here this morning. It's very gratifying, very meaningful to see so many of our government agencies, partners at all levels, state, county, city, and FEMA as well, to be here. We really, truly are all in this together, and it's very meaningful that we have this strong partnership that we've built in order to keep the residents and the visitors of Hawaii safe. So I do want to thank you for that. And just a few words echo some of the preparedness messages that we've heard already this morning. I think that's really the most important thing that we can take away from this press conference, from this outlook, is that it is up to all of us to prepare ourselves, our families, our communities, so that we are able to be resilient in the face of any hazard. Hurricane season presents those hazards to us all together at once. If we have a hurricane, We can see all the hazards come together, but all year round we're susceptible to natural hazards from the weather. So it's a great time to remember these messages and to remember that at the beginning of this hurricane season, we need to double check and make sure that we're prepared. And just real briefly, as partners in building disaster preparedness and community resilience, NOAA's National Weather Service works closely with the state of Hawaii, all of the local county, city and county officials, FEMA, community organizations such as American Red Cross. We're all working together to ensure that critical weather and water information informs important life and property-saving decisions made by emergency officials, citizens, and visitors to this state of Hawaii. And we're grateful for, as I said, that strong partnership. We thank you all for your support in NOAA's initiative to build the weather-ready nation and the National Weather Service's core mission of protection of life and property. So our message is simple. The time to prepare for hurricane season is right now. Many of us probably feel like we had preparations that we took last year with Hurricanes Lane, Tropical Storm Olivia, and other hurricanes that passed further away but still brought us impacts. Again, some parts of the state did see major impacts from these systems. Some of you didn't see the impacts, but you were prepared anyway. These storms serve as reminders that the key to being prepared is doing the planning well ahead of time. So if we look at what we had last year, in 2018 we had 6 tropical cyclones either form or move into the Central Pacific during the hurricane season. Notably, last year all of them at some point were hurricanes during their life cycle. If we look at what the predicted range was for the 2018 season, we see that lies within the predicted forecast activity. Statistically, if we look at some of the factors in predicting what the tropical cyclone season might bring, if you move forward 2 more, there you go. Then we look at the state of the ENSO. The ENSO is better known as El Nino or La Nina, and it correlates with warm water along the equator in the central and eastern Pacific. So this is one key factor in predicting seasonal activity. There is plenty of warm water out there, both around Hawaii, around the islands in the state of Hawaii, and also along the equator in that ENSO or El Nino region. So this El Nino condition is is likely to continue through this hurricane season. An additional factor to the water temperatures is the predictions for wind shear. The long-range climate models at this time predict that less persistent and weaker wind shear will be present over the Central Pacific during the hurricane season. Thus, as we present the NOAA outlook for the 2019 Central Pacific hurricane season, we are calling for a total of 5 to 8 tropical cyclones, which is above the normal of 4 to 5 per season. If we look at it probability-wise, there's a 70% chance of an above normal season, a 20% chance of a near normal season, and a 10% chance of a below normal numbers of tropical cyclones during the hurricane season in the Central Pacific Basin. The hurricane season, as a reminder, goes from June 1st through November 30th. This seasonal outlook, which is developed as a collaborative effort between the Central Pacific Hurricane Center and NOAA's Climate Prediction Center, is for the entire Central Pacific and does not specifically address or predict how many of these tropical cyclones will threaten directly the state of Hawaii. But we ask that we all please be ready for the possibility that that may happen this season. So as we prepare for another active hurricane season in the Central Pacific, we urge everyone to have an emergency plan now so that you are ready for the devastating impacts that a tropical cyclone could bring to the state of Hawaii. It is essential that you know where and how to get official information, even in the event of a power failure, and that you know and that you have your emergency supply kit ready well before any storms threaten. Remember that preparation is a continual process, not just a one-time event. I thank you for your attention, and I conclude this presentation now. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Chris. Once again, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. Before we wrap up this final portion, I want to let you know about a new project that's on the near horizon. June 1st, the start of hurricane season, at Castle and Cook Aviation at Honolulu Airport, we'll be hosting our first ever Pacific Hurricane Awareness Tour. These tours are designed to raise awareness of hurricane threats, encourage public preparedness, and give you a chance to talk to pilots who fly through hurricanes and see one of their aircraft, the NOAA Gulfstream that will be here on display. You'll receive information in a media release shortly after this. We also have hard copies printed out with the other information that we'll hand out at the conclusion here. And we'll also be providing additional details and information through our webpage and social media feeds. This event is free and open to the public. We encourage everybody to come out. This is your chance to see the Hurricane Hunter aircraft, take pictures, talk to the Hurricane Hunters themselves, the flight crews, and the hurricane forecasters. Thank you very much. This concludes the formal portion and will be available for individual interviews afterwards. Thank you.